So I know I kind of talked about this before in another video about using random charts to generate adventures, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about that and maybe a little bit more practically and how I've just recently used it. So I've also mentioned before that I'm not a particular fan of Dungeons and Dragons. However, I have ended up at some point or other acquiring these two adventures, The Lost Mind of Phandalin and the Dragon by Spire Peak. Excuse me. They're both available in their starter kit and essentials kits, which I suppose if you like Dungeons and Dragons, they're pretty good, but I still find, even in the most basic form, I find its rules a combination of impenetrable and aggravating. So it's not something that I'm a big fan of. However, as I've also mentioned before, I really enjoy Dungeon Crawl Classics. Find it to be a weirdly fun game considering how mechanics heavy it is, but I still find it very enjoyable. It's enjoyable in a very different way. It's not telling epic fantasy, it's usually telling bizarre fantasy, and sometimes they say sword and sorcery. I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't know. How do you define genre? Whatever. Doesn't matter. But the point is, I decided for some reason that I'm not 100% sure on, that I'm going to run these two adventures. I'm going to kind of mash them together along with some other stuff, and I'm going to run them for a friend of mine in a sort of a experimental solo scenario. I say solo, I mean, he'll be the only player, but he'll have multiple characters because he's going to run through a funnel with the 0 level characters and watch them all get destroyed. You know, the usual fun. In that, I decided I wanted to just kind of look at designing a few other scenarios, other encounters to go along with what's in the book, which I'm going to be modifying heavily because I'm going to really give it the DCC spin. I'm going to make some of the creatures a lot more interesting. Definitely going to be removing a bunch of the creatures that are in there and subbing different ones. Something that I've never liked about published scenarios, particularly ones that I've seen from Dungeons and Dragons, is the haphazard nature of creatures that don't blend properly, that don't, like, it's not even just, and this was bad enough, it's not even just that you have, like, a dungeon and it supposedly hasn't been open for 100 years, and you go in and there's a band of goblins and a ogre and a dragon and all. It's not even bad enough that they're all in there in this weird lost place for no reason that's really usually worked into things. And I guess maybe they've gotten better over time, but whatever. But it's also, why are these things together? Why is it a room full of goblins next to a room full of dark dwarves, next to a room full of ghosts? What? The goblins never go out that door? Like, these guys have lived next to each other for years because the doors have been locked on this place and they've never talked to it. It's just stupid. It always bugged me. And there is definitely some of that in both, I think, Lost Minds of Phandelver and in Dragon by Spire Peak, where there's definitely stuff together that it just doesn't work, and it just seems tacked on because the writer, I guess, thinks, well, you'll be bored of fighting blank, so let's put in this other thing. I specifically can't stop thinking about the and I'm sorry, spoilers if you're ever thinking about playing that, whatever. But the Banshee in the Dwarven Stronghold, what? Why is she there? That makes no effort to really explain it. It just feels so out of place when it happens. So, scrapping that, obviously. But anyway, that's not necessarily the point. But the point is that I wanted to throw in a lot of varied interactions. I don't just want it to be combat. I don't just want it to be one slog after another slog. I want varied interactions. And so one of the things I decided to do early on is instead of starting with goblin arrows, which will be the first big combat scenario for the character and really the sort of inciting incident to get them involved in everything, I decided first I wanted to have a more non-combat, like a problem-solving or an investigation or mystery kind of scenario. So what I decided, I didn't have an idea for it. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just thought I'd like to do something and maybe something non-combat. And I'd like to put it at the very beginning, just to sort of set a mood, really, more than anything else. So what I went to first was I went to this relatively new book as a time of recording called Wanderings, a Gothic Roll and Read Table. This is from Geek Gamers. And what she has done in here is she has taken excerpts from Gothic novels, and you roll randomly on a D88. That's 2 8-sided dice. Read 1 is the tens, 1 is the ones place. So 7 and 6 is 76. Go back here to 76, and it would be this entry here, which I am not going to read to you. So I went in and I rolled randomly on that chart, and I should have written down the number, but I didn't. I don't remember which number it was, but it involved a guy climbing some old rickety stairs, and he mentions a woman, and he mentions the stairs are like crumbling, and I believe at the end of the story, like the stairs collapse under him. So I read that, and I thought, okay, old rickety stairs, that's kind of cool. It's got a good mysterious vibe to it. You know, all right, sure. So I got to thinking, what are old rickety stairs going to be in? And part of the Fendelver business is that it used to be a town. It was destroyed, and now people are coming back and they're rebuilding the town on the foundations of the old town. So I thought, well, we're in that area. This area has been destroyed by this thing that happened a generation or two ago. So there's a tower, and it's an old, it's essentially a burned out old stone tower. It's crumbled. The interior went up in smoke, and so inside there is somewhat of a framework of rickety stairs that go down, excuse me, into a lower level. So from there, I was like, okay, well, that's cool. That sort of sets the mood. It's got that kind of a little bit gothic. You haven't quite made it to town yet, but you see some of the degradation of the structures, and okay, cool. But it also mentions a woman in that entry, and I'm like, thinking about, okay, but I want to keep with the gothic thing, so I'm like, I don't know, maybe like a ghost or something. So from there, not really knowing, again, what I wanted to do, I just kind of started flipping through these two books, the Fantasy Tome of Lists and the Fantasy Tome of Lists 2 by, let's see, James Cato, right there. So I started flipping through these, and I really like a lot of the lists in here. Now, as I mentioned in the previous one, yes, absolutely, I could come up with my own random tables. I don't need to buy them. But these are not super expensive. You can get them on Amazon for, I don't know, I think they were $14. They might not have even been that much. Maybe they were $12. I don't remember. But they're, 300 pages filled with all kinds of these lists, all kinds of these random tables to roll on. I do have some issues with the organization. I don't find them necessarily as user-friendly as I'd like. I've thought about actually sitting down and writing my own index or my own, take like certain subjects and then take the page numbers for those subjects so I can easily consult them more on a basis that I think of as logical. And what I mean by that is, like, if I'm thinking about what do I want to roll for this peasant's job? Well, I don't go to like jobs, I don't go to careers, I don't go to peasants. No, I go into fantasy, I think it was fantasy jobs. I don't remember. I don't even remember, but it doesn't go under what I would think. Fantasy skills is a thing. Fantasy trap, like, I don't know. I find it a little bit hard to look for a specific thing that I want in here. But what I'll do is flip through these lists and see what applies to what I am looking at. So I remember going through here, and I think I found a thing on undead creatures. And I thought, well, all right, what's an undead creature that I might find? Yeah, let's see, undead monsters, 272. And I believe it was on this chart, because again, I was just kind of looking at them and rolling on anyone that really sparked my interest as I rolled by. I think on here somewhere there's a Death Knight. Yeah, Death Knight. Here we go. A knight, let's see, a knight is the rotting remains of a warrior that has been corrupted by evil and greed. I'm like, okay. So that just kind of got me thinking about stuff. And what I ended up doing as I rolled through multiple charts on here, just sparking ideas. I didn't have to stick with anything, or I could do my own interpretations of them. It was more to spawn the idea. That's why I was using these charts. So what I eventually came up with was an encounter, the Burned Tower. It's still a day or so out from the town. Assuming that the party stops, maybe there's bad weather, there's some reason why they want to stop and stay under some outcropping of the tower so that they can have protection to set up a camp and keep themselves buffeted from the wind or whatever. So they hear, because again, somewhere in here I rolled on one of these charts and it came into something singing. So I have them, they're sitting there, they hear some singing. They look, assuming that they do. I mean, maybe they won't investigate, but assuming there's an investigation into anything, they look down into this tower, see the rickety, burned out stairs that are barely holding together, and at the bottom there is not only this sound of music coming up, but there's also like a glow. So again, we're assuming that investigation is going to be done. Again, don't know. Maybe they won't, but this is the encounter. They can climb down these stairs. I then went in and did a little bit of statistics in case the stairs do crumble under them, what they would roll and that sort of thing. And at the bottom, they find a large rubble-strewn room and timber piles. And then, because again, some effects that I rolled on one of these, fantasy charts, something I think about chaos effects or something, because I was just throwing different things out. When the song starts up again, things start to float. They end up finding a ghost. There's this ghost of this Death Knight. And the Death Knight is, in my head, is some kind of old order, some sort of like maybe evil paladin, if you will. But one of the personality traits I ended up rolling was that this person was at peace. So my thought is that this person, this sort of mean, evil warrior, had gone in here some time ago to take shelter from something, and part of the tower had collapsed on them. Now, maybe it was during the original disaster that caused all of this stuff, or maybe it was later and this was a traveler that stopped off. Either way, the tower collapsed on them. They had this armor. They didn't die, or they didn't die from the damage from the collapse, but they were stuck and they couldn't get out, and then they did die. And so the ghost has been stuck there, this unhappy, dead ghost of this possibly evil paladin type character. In meditation over time, this character kind of came to terms with themselves, came to a peaceful concept. So they're in this state of spiritual zen, but they're still anchored to this body due to the means of their death and because their body hasn't been properly taken care of. So the idea here is that the characters maybe will understand this, will figure this out, hopefully, will give the body a proper burial, and while doing that, because I love to throw crazy, weird monkey wrenches into my Dungeon Crawl Classics games, if they handle the Death Knight suit of armor, it will take over whoever whoever handles it. It won't take them over and change their personality, but it will attach itself to them. And there's going to be some benefits and some negatives to that I've got sort of worked out. So anyway, there's all stuff that I came to through this chart. I ended up, going through and adding some other stuff. I think I used these books, these random tables from Matt David's. These are a little less bang for your buck. I don't know, the lists are okay. They're definitely a lot smaller. They're like $8 a piece, something like that. So you're really not, for your money, you're not getting nearly as much. I do like that all the charts, at least I believe all the charts, are D100, which is a lot easier than these. These charts are sort of all over the place. There's D66, D12, D20, D100, D300. There's like all kinds of different numbered charts. So it can get a little bit annoying tracking those down. I like having the D100s, but whatever. It's just a style choice. I also like having a heck of a lot more material in these for not a lot more money. So I ended up doing some other stuff. I threw in a little bit of treasure down at the bottom, mostly some books. And what else did I do? I found this thing that an aqueous charm. So it's a little charm that they might get. Anyway, added a few other things. Primarily, it's just investigation. And I thought it would be an interesting start, again, because they'll get something pretty impressive. They'll have this little mystery, little sadness. There's actually potential, because DCC 0 level characters are so pathetic. If they fall on the stairs, there's a good chance whoever falls dies, because the damage is enough to kill most 0 level characters. So, they could lose somebody right there. But if they don't, and if they get out and they bury this knight, then when they've made some good karma, they have found something pretty cool. And it's just sets a mood. And because, as I've gone through these two adventures, undead end up playing a lot of part in them, I feel like it also sets a little bit of the theme, because the theme, I feel like, of this thing, even though part of it is that there's dragons, part of it is that there's a lot of orc and goblin activity, and there's a lot of stuff going on. There's several factions going on, but undead keep coming up. And in fact, I'm replacing at least one critter with undead, because it makes way more sense for it to be undead than what they put in there. So undead will be a big part of it, so I figure this ghost would be a good early setup. So anyway, that's me trying to put together just an encounter. I mostly did it for fun, but I like the encounter as I see it, how it looks. I like the encounter that I came up with just playing around with these random charts. And that's more what these are about. It's not that I have to do what these charts roll out to exactly. It's that I can take these charts and use them as a point of inspiration to build something. And by rolling on multiple charts and kind of adding them together, and does this one mesh? Does this one? No, well, I can drop this one, I'll re-roll. Yeah, these things work, but it gets me thinking. It gets the wheels turning. And eventually, you can come up with some pretty cool stuff. So anyway, that's me, that's charts, that's something for this DCC game I've got coming up. I don't know, by the time this video posts, I may have actually run the scenario, and maybe I'll even know how it's going. I don't know. We'll see. So, do the usual YouTube things, and I'll talk to you later.